Okay, hi and welcome to everyone today. We're really excited for another talk in our series. This week we have Pat Buckland and we have Marc Cashin, and they're going to give a talk to us just shortly, but I'll give a little brief introduction before I hand over to Pat. Pat is a lecturer at Mary Immaculate College in our business department. He has a PhD in business from the Southeast Technological University, as well as a bachelor's in business and a master's in business in lean practice. Patrick has authored several publications, including an article in the Irish Journal of Management, and he has received several awards, including the Best Paper Award at the Irish Academy for Management Conference. Currently, he is a founding member of the Irish Centre for AI Education in Research and the organizer of our seminar series. We also have today with us Marc. Marc has 25 years experience in technical, managerial, and senior leadership roles within higher profile blue chip multinational organizations in the food processing, manufacturing, telecommunications, and IT industries. He's a former member of the Cambridge University's Technology Road Mapping User Group and possesses extensive experience in finance, technical development, program and project management, business development, strategic management, and entrepreneurship, as well as operational and supply chain management. Marc has significant experience in strategic knowledge management and learning. He's contributed to organizational change and growth through professional development and action learning. And in 2018, he was appointed Professor of Knowledge Management and Work-Based Learning in the Faculty of Economics within the Université Telematica International in Rome. You can tell my my Italian there isn't great, but we'll carry on. He lectures on a number of third-level programs, including business modeling, operational and supply chain management, innovation and project management, and systems thinking, research, and leadership. He has nearly 22 years of experience lecturing at undergraduate and postgraduate levels, including supervising PhDs, DProfs, and DBAs, doctoral candidates. So welcome to you both. We're delighted to have you chat with us today and talk to us. And I'll hand over to Pat now just shortly. Just a reminder to everyone in the audience that we do ask that unless you have pre-approved permission, that you don't insert an AI agent into this talk. So thanks so much, and we'll hand over to Pat now to take us away.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's brilliant to be able to be here with you and to really just to be able to talk about kind of, how AI has really kind of impacted our work as educators, especially around assessment. So I'm just going to share my screen. I suppose myself and Marc are kind of kindred spirits in the sense that we're very much kind of enthusiasts when it comes to AI in terms of playing with it and just really enjoying what it can do for us in our work. So let's see. I need to share my screen one moment. Okay. Excellent. Can you see my screen there now? Do you see that? Okay. Okay. So what I want to talk about today is, well, first I'm just going to give a brief overview of really kind of what it means to reimagine education with regard to AI. And I think it's a really important thing that we need to consider because, everything has kind of shifted when AI came on the scene. One thing that I really like this picture where, we're all in our comfort zone as educators. The next thing AI comes along and it gives us a kick. And all we find is our comfort zone is a mile away. And we're here trying to figure out the best way to kind of assess our students, where we're fair, but also where we can ensure academic integrity and fair assessment. So we call this the crisis of originality, and this is really interesting. And I really kind of brought me back to the scene from The Matrix, where Neo was brought into this kind of reality, artificial reality, and he asks, is this real? And Morpheus goes, what is real, and how do you define real? And so what we really need to do is ask, what is original? and how do we define original student work? I think that's a really important thing, because how we used to define original student work has changed with the introduction of technology, and has really kind of pushed forward ever since we have, since AI has come on the scene. So I want to kind of go back to that kind of idea. So what is original, and how we define original work? I asked ChatGPT to give me a definition of original student work, and this is what it gave me. It says original student work refers to assignments that are entirely created by the student using their own ideas, language analysis, and expressions without authorized assistance or copying from other sources. I suppose the key word here is without unauthorized assistance. And so as educators and as institutions, we need to understand what we define as original, especially in this new era of AI. I usually kind of use this kind of analogy. We have two guys here and they're digging a hole in the ground. One is using obviously a shovel, the other one is using an excavator. So at what point where does the barrier lie? That stops. Where's the line drawn to where we say that the man is not digging the hole at all? Is it when he starts getting, if it's an automated digger, is it when he programs that digger, is he still digging the hole, or does he have to use his own bare hands to do it? So in education, we have lots of different tools that are often integrated into Word, like Grammarly and spell check. And at what point do we say that this is not original, this is not my work? And that's something we need certainly to consider. So at the end of the day, it really kind of falls to us, ourselves as educators and our institutions. We are the arbiters of what is considered original student work. So we decide, but we need to be able to make that decision in a good way, in the sense that we take into account how AI is affecting the landscape of assessment. So there are a couple of things that we can do. So traditionally, many assessments were very much in regard to kind of regurgitating knowledge, just bringing knowledge back. They study and then it all comes out in the exam. And we need to start to move away from that kind of idea and kind of go into the areas of understanding and even skills development, where students are able to demonstrate what they've learned in real life scenarios, use their critical thinking skills, and to be able to problem solve on the go. And these are the kind of assessments that really kind of demonstrate learning. Knowledge is very easy for AI to give you back. For example, if write an essay on such and such, we all know that AI can do that very, very easily. But AI finds it very difficult to actually problem solving real world problems, multi-step problems. And this is where we need to kind of start moving with our assessments design. So there are a couple of things that we should always be mindful, I believe, when we're kind of designing and kind of implementing, elements into our assessments. And I usually go by what's called the 4 C's, which is critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. So these 3 higher order skill, or 4 higher order skills, can really kind of bring the assessment alive and make it nearly impossible to be replicated by AI. Critical thinking, of course. Now, this doesn't preclude the use of AI by any means. AI can be used in these kind of assessments, but it still requires the student to be able to use your own judgment. To be creative is something that is, again, AI cannot do. It only regurgitates what we train it on. So creativity is something we can always build in. Collaboration, we probably do that at the moment with group projects and the sort. And of course, communication can come in various forms, such as presentations, performances, and so forth. So it does all depend on the type of assessment and the subject. So there's no kind of, I'm very reluctant to say, oh, this is how you have to design your assessment, but rather give you kind of a framework using the 4 C's and try to keep those in mind when designing the assessments. That it's no longer usually good enough just to say, write a report on this subject, but to actually be more creative and engage the students more in that. So I think I suppose the main key is clarity. Clarity is key when dealing with assessments. A lot of students can be very they might have various different ideas about AI, how to use it, and because if there's any ambiguity, what happens is sometimes they tend just to not use it at all instead of risking cheating in their own words. So it's really important that whether you plan on using AI or not using AI in your assessment, it's always important to be clear on your expectations and say, look, this is what we're going to do. This is what you can do. This is what you cannot do, and be very specific in your instruction. So then what we're going to do now is I'm going to hand the time over to Marc, and Marc is going to just you go ahead, Marc, and you want to continue on. He's going to share us a few really good techniques to use in AI.
Okay, and you can pin me to make sure that you see me on full screen. Is that okay? And you can hear me. Rightio. So I'm going to start to look at some case studies on assessments. And I have some PowerPoints that I'm going to show, but through my screen, not by sharing the screen, for reasons that will become evident very shortly. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, queries, insults, jokes, I'll give you my Revolut number and you can submit €10 and your question, comments in the message section of Revolut. Anyway, let's get down to the fun. So today we're going to have a look at a whistle-stop tour of 3 key areas. Very briefly, we're going to look at natural language and what's effective or not effective when we look at prompts. And then finally, a couple of case studies that I've used in assessment and how I prompted the students to use AI, excuse me, for their assignments. A lot can be said about natural language, and it's quite complex. And if you look at all these specific areas of natural language, excuse me, study of linguistic meanings and so on and so forth, from a communications concept perspective from ourselves, and you have the 7-38-55 rule, 7% being the spoken word, 38 being the tone of voice, generally speaking, and 55% being the body language, movement, and so on. But AI doesn't know that. AI doesn't say any of that. And this is why I like to say that linguistics, understanding the nuances of language and how it is used in different contexts is crucial for crafting effective prompts. So very clearly, how do we actually communicate with the AI? How do we build these prompts? And of course, you'll hear all that, and you will have seen all the adverts, some of the top paying jobs being, prompt engineers. And it's just a logical step of giving instructions to an AI. And if you build that up into a sequence of events, then you have an agent. There's one particular application that would even help you build that. It's called Zapier or something like that, Zapier. And it can string all your prompts together and pull information from all sorts of platforms and so on. So the effective way that you build prompts is based on the language you use, regardless of whether it's French, Chinese, German, Irish, or even English. It's how we actually interpret and try to get the machine to understand what we're looking for. And bearing in mind, when these AI models function, they're not thinking like us. We don't dip into our past experiences. We do. We look at our past experiences, similar type situations, and we're going through a lot of different processing when we want to make a decision or when we're faced with some new event, we'll actually try and parallel that with some prior experience and so on. AI doesn't do that. AI takes the raw data, which is an interesting perspective on how these reasoning models actually work. And this has been coming to the fore in the last number of months in how AI is actually thinking about problem solving and so on, dealing with the constructs in front of it, not based on prior experiences and events. So in a quick evolution, Eliza, back in 1960, the year I was born, yes, I'm old and still love technology. We had in the 70s, then we had SHRDLU, which was another version of a type of artificial intelligence developed in the MIT. Then we moved to 2010. This is where the fun really started with first versions of GPT. And if you're talking to companies, many of them will tell you that they've been using some form of artificial intelligence since the mid-noughties. And then they start morphing into GPT-1, then 2019, GPT-2, 2020, GPT-3, and famously, in November 2022, it became generally available to the public. And at that point, I think a number of us would have jumped on the bandwagon in around December when we got wind of what was happening. And in my case, it was over the December break, and I just found it fascinating what it could do. But really, the fun that I've had with this was watching this evolve and the pace of change, and how I even find it really overwhelming, the number of platforms. I think the last count was something like 3,500 different platforms. There's one website called futuretools.com, which is a great tracking site. It's the compare.com for AI platforms, but you can choose the different areas you'd like to look at. And then, of course, in 23, we had ChatGPT 4. Then we had the Omni version, 24, and then February of this year, we had the Orion version. Now, the numbers go out of sequence for some strange reasons, so that's why they're actually redesigning their platform. And what's coming down the road to us is ChatGPT 5. What's the big change in that one? It's introducing video for starters. So it'll be able to analyze more visual content and so on. So it's going to be extremely powerful, plus all the usual learning models that will be embedded, making it far more user-friendly, wider sources, and so on. Which brings me back to the key point of prompt engineering. And really, there is no mystery about this. And why I say that is because if you think of it, you're instructing a machine to do something. Evaluate a piece of text, analyze or summarize a piece. So you're given clear, straightforward, simple instructions initially. And I've seen one analogy where they talked about it. It's like talking to a child. You give clear instructions, or if you want to look at it more technically, single loop learning. Give instructions, it goes up and does it. Eventually you get into double loop learning, a Q&A session. Most of the reasoning models now actually will ask you, is this what you want? Or I can make suggestions on what you've already asked. So it's a kind of a double loop learning. And then, of course, you're moving into a higher ordinate of interaction in triple loop learning with the machine. So when we look at prompt engineering, some of the key points that I wanted to highlight, ditch all the fluff, all the pleasantries and so on. That said, you will see that I've used it once or twice, but in the examples or the case studies. But you're talking to machine. What do you think? Can you please do this? I'd be very grateful if you do that. It's not a person, strange enough. But if you're comfortable looking at or interacting that way, by all means do so. Because it can actually begin to form an interaction with you and gets familiar with your styles. Now, I would predicate this by saying that when you're using these platforms, that you use the settings to define who you are what will you like information presented to you, and so on, so on. Who you are, what's your background, your occupation. So give it the information, so it gives it creates a persona of you. Always suggest to do that. And of course, you can also say, tick the box, do not share any of the data as part of the learning model. It can actually learn still, but it doesn't use your data. It doesn't go into the public domain. So you have those tick boxes, and that certainly circumvents issues that potentially could arise from GDPR and data breaches and so on. Just be cognizant of that, and so on. So we look down to it. So provide context, guide the AI, how the AI should write, be specific, tell the AI what to write about. So clear, precise instructions, use limitations, specify what to avoid, set word count limits, and narrow the focus. Again, because time is precious, even though these platforms can generate, phenomenal reports and data and so on, you want to have the key points. You want to have precise data information, because we have too much noise going on, that we want to get to the kernel of what we're trying to research and make our own informed decisions as to how we use that data and so on, or the output more precisely. And next, this rule number 6 is quite important. Consider iterative prompting. Start with a simple prompt and build complexity. And I think Pat has an example of that in his case study later on, which is quite a lengthy prompt. Mine are very short and straightforward, as you'll see in the case studies. But again, you can build this and fine-tune it all the way down. Split big tasks into smaller chunks. It's like our own logical way of doing things. You're challenged with a large task. Logically, we break it down into small, manageable chunks. This is, for all intents and purposes, personal project management. You have a mammoth task to achieve, deliver something. How do we go about it? Break it down to small, manageable pieces, while at the same time being aware of the bigger picture. We'll piece the jigsaw together eventually, but small, bite-sized pieces, and then build it from there. That's how you become more confident in what you're getting back from the system. And of course, there's a bonus rule, as with everything else. You can also ask the AI to refine your prompt. Once you've given it enough examples, for example, you're training your own version of the AI to behave in a particular way. Now, I mentioned this behavior because this often contributes to a lot of discussion around bias and hallucinations. Now, even as late as this morning, there's a professor in computer science in North Carolina University, where they've now identified the causes of hallucinations. In other words, bad data or bad responses or obscure responses or misinformation. And the interesting way he explained their technique was that if you ask or try to train an AI system, what is a dog? And you showed pictures of a dog and in various positions on furniture and so on. And it noticed that they always attributed the collar, and sometimes cats also had collars. So they found that this spurious data was being encoded into the interpretation of what a dog was. And sometimes the machine, through hallucination, was returning a cat, for example. And they attributed the color as being an attribute or a piece of data of a dog, which clearly, as we know, is not, when we look at the pure definition and description of a dog. But they've built technology to identify and cut out that spurious data or negative data. And this is a major step towards reducing misinformation and hallucination, even though those instances can be quite small. But when it comes to critical decision making, we want to have pure or raw data, and thereby mitigating issues around bias, for example. So use the AI to prompt. So now I'm going to go off screen and go into the first case study, which all going well. I will be in the background. I'll be stopping and starting this as I'm going through it. So in this first case, I've just used a simple example of writing MCQs and true-false statements as part of an assessment process. And this is me going away through all my files and folders until I eventually get down to the piece for today. And here I'm looking for my module descriptor with this file here. And I'll show you one now as it's coming up shortly. And then I open my Notebook LM AI platform. Now, I do have Plus. I do subscribe to it. And the only difference is that I have higher volumes. In other words, I can have 300 resources active or uploaded at any one time, compared to, I think it's 50 in the standard unpaid version. But it's a very powerful platform and brilliant for teaching. I'll show you some of this now shortly. So first thing, you create a new chat or a new interaction with the LLM, Notebook LM, and you're asked to upload. And here I've uploaded the PDF version of my module descriptor. It goes through its thing, analyzing, and so on and so on. And it pulls the title. And this is the actual module descriptor. It's on one of the modules that teach to actually second-year students, and it's operations and supply chain management. Now, the first 5, you can see these are the learning outcomes. And then it shows 9 indicative syllabus topics to support those learning outcomes. Pretty standard stuff. So I've run in and I've asked it here very simply. I've speeded this up, fortunately. Write 5 MCQs for each of the topics listed in the indicative syllabus. Identify the correct answer in each MCQ in bold and output it in table format. And this was the result. Perfect. Now I've stopped it here because, again, all of these points here reference, you can actually click on those, and under normal circumstances, because this is a recording, you won't see them, but you can see the reference back to the main document itself, the module descriptor. And there you have all 9. You have 5 MCQs for each of the 9 indicative syllabus topics. Then what I would suggest you always do is save what you've done here. Save this note into the studio, and over here you can open the document again, particularly because you can have a history of all your interactions. Therefore, you can go back to these particular files once you've saved them. If you don't save them, they're lost, unfortunately. While I'm here, it's worth mentioning that you have this option here to generate an audio file. Currently, there are 2 people. It's a lady and a gentleman that interprets your document from here, and they create a chat, a podcast. And I've used this by taking my PowerPoints and extracting the key points from all my PowerPoints and running it through this system and getting a podcast, anywhere from 7 minutes to 25 minutes of a podcast, which I make available to students as well. And you might say, well, how is that relevant to your material? Because it's based on my PowerPoints. It won't go outside those areas. Now, it can become a little bit monotonous when you're using the same 2 voices. You can actually change those. There are other platforms that you can go off and with a little bit of ingenuity, you can change the voices or replace it with your own voice. But that's a whole other hour's discussion. So we have our 9 MCQs. Then I've asked it to write 3 true or false statements for each of the topics in the indicative syllabus. And Grammarly even came in and kicked out my listed word. And here it wrote the true-false statements. What I've done here is I've literally grabbed that screen and put it into a Word document. Now this in its entirety, now to the eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll see that I have true here, and you might see false and true, because I reran the prompt and asked it to suffix each of the statements with the true or false. And that's my core document. Then I went on and I just selected all these in bulk and just changed emboldened it. And then I removed the true false. And I had one more job to do with that. I saved it as that file. Then I went in again and I did one more effort. And that was to get rid of these sections here, which were the actual answers. So I just wanted to be left with the raw statements, which I can then either upload to Moodle or distribute through Moodle to the students. So as you can see here now, I have my MCQs, which are the test documents themselves, the answers, and then I have the true and false statements and the answers. Now, I didn't do it here, but normally what I would do is upload those MCQs onto Moodle, let the students open it up, let them answer the questions, then download the CSV file, Excel type file, and then just check and validate all the answers. Now, I took these 4 documents and I went into the next platform, which was or is Perplexity. And this is a very powerful platform again. I create a new thread here, and what I wanted to do was verify the learning outcomes. So checking that the MCQs and true false statements test the learning outcomes, the 5 learning outcomes of the module itself, which is something I would probably not have done previously once the module was written, for example. And oftentimes we're updating our briefs and our assessments, and we might accidentally miss a learning outcome by changing our assignments or our briefs from year to year. So now we fetch the module descriptor, and we have the original reference documents, and I say referencing the learning outcomes in the module descriptor document, list the MCQs which test each of the learning outcomes. And please provide your response in table format. I love table formats. It's easy on my brain. Now you can just see the 3 documents that are loaded into Perplexity. The true false statements and answers and MCQs and the original document. And here are the learning outcomes extracted from the module descriptor and the MCQs. And it also included the true false statements, even though I didn't ask it to, which was interesting. But it saved me a bit of work. Now it says here, if we require a full list of MCQs, numbers, or exact wording, please specify, and I can extract those details. I say, sure, why not? Knock yourself out, Perplexity. Go ahead and do it. And there you have. Yes, provide a full list, as you suggest. It went off and did its thing. How am I doing time-wise? Okay. And we get the full list of, so I can cross-check and that all the learning objectives are tested. Then, can you verify that all learning outcomes are tested? So if this column was blank on this side here, then clearly learning outcomes were not tested, but as it happened, they were. So far, so good. Now we wanted to have some real fun. And this is case number 2. Generating an assessment rubric and evaluating students' assignments. Sounds contentious. This time I'm using DeepSeek. Now, why am I using DeepSeek? Because I like it, and simply because it actually steps through the process of how it's arriving at the end result or the response for you. You'll see this now. So I had uploaded the actual assignment brief, and I asked it to perform some tasks on that. And I also have this document, which is, quite simply, it's the Bloom's taxonomy and grading and marks and so on. So it's a number of years old, but I modified or I've updated each year, but it's a core document. And I've shared this with a number of colleagues. It's a nice condensed version of the criteria for achieving the different grades and so on. You would be familiar with it, with all the descriptors, the knowledge type, knowledge kind, and so on and so on. So I upload that along with the module descriptor or module brief. And then I ask it, please write a detailed rubric for the attached brief using the detailed marking scheme 2025 as reference. And this is where I say again, it goes off and does this thing. Now, this thing is really powerful. It's really worth, when you generate, reading down through this. Excuse me. So I got a version of the output, which I was reasonably happy with. Now you say, well, Mark, where is it? And I will show you shortly. There it is there. I know you can't see it yet. Then I said, please rewrite your response in summary table format. It reruns the whole process. Excuse me. And again, up here was the output, and this is simply copied and pasted into a Word document. Now it looks a little bit unusable, so I went in and did a little bit of magic with table design and so on. And I ended up with this type of document. And if you look down here, for example, performance objectives, 40% of the marks for this assignment is going for that. 5 performance objectives, and that innovatively integrates all 5 performance objectives, data-driven critique, and so on. So it was very precise in terms of what was expected to achieve 70 plus, for example, all the ways down. So you can see the criteria being used in this rubric are quite accurate. Excuse me. And the final presentation of professional structure, flawless and referencing error-free language, and so on. So that was the first version of so I then asked it to rewrite the rubric table. This time I wanted to show the weighting in separate, and I even misspelled separate purposefully so, because, okay, there's an E where an A should have been, but phonetically it understood what I was talking about. And I made a simpler purposeful error in the spelling of assignment. So if we come back to the work that we're looking at, please include section 6, the grand total, and so on, summary. Now, don't worry if you can't read these. This will all be made available, all this content, and even these videos show you can actually slow them down if you wish. And here's the summary table up here. And this time I extracted and I just used the green version of the table design and saved it. Went in again and edited it because I didn't want the blue. So this now became my final version of my rubric. Straight copy from here. more presentable. So now that we have the rubric, let's evaluate some assignments. One of these was real. 3 of them were deviations from the real. So here, yeah. So here we have the summary rubric, which we saw in green, the green table, Word document, or well, PDF document. And here are the 4 assignments. One of these, as I said, was an actual assignment from students. The others were variants of that with purposeful errors put into them and parts deleted to see how it would perform. So critically evaluate the first one, number A or version A, against a rubric and award marks under each section. And as I say in the matrix, where is Neo? He's off doing his thing. So can you rewrite the response in summary format? It isn't quite that fast, but it's not far off it. So now again, I asked it to rerun the test for the next one. Doing its thing. So I have assignment B or version B. Then copy and paste and change it to C. Then copy and paste and signed it to D. So now I have all 4 assignments assessed against the same rubric. Then I asked it, can you provide a summary table showing the marking awarded for all assignments? And here you see the results. And the marks awarded ranging from 52, 57, 64, and 72. And it gives some tremendous feedback. Under each of those individual evaluations, it gave feedback. And we can see some of this coming up. So assessing them against the learning outcomes. Again, added in the module descriptor. Now, of course, you can do all of this also in Notebook LM, just before this continues. And you can actually, you can untick the box for the different resources. On your left-hand side on the menu option, you have all your resources that you've uploaded. So you can pick and choose which resources that you want to use. Well, obviously core ones such as the marking rubric and the module descriptor, and then you can pick X number of assignments or just one assignment and get individual detailed feedback. I have tested that, and I have tested it in 2 or 3 conversations to validate the consistency of the feedback, and it's been 100% accurate and consistent, more importantly. So referencing the module descriptor, how effectively has the summary of all 4 assignments achieved the learning outcomes? Why did I do this? Self-test. I wanted to see, had I written an effective enough assignment that I was testing all the learning outcomes that I had identified in the module descriptor. So example, learning outcome number 2, 3, 4 and 5, for example, or 3, 4 and 5, were they being tested? So I scanned down through all of these 4 assignments in this case to test for myself, have I done so? And then asked it to give it in summary table format. All the information is in this section. And you can see for version A, version B, partially, minimally, and then in this assignment here, fully achieved. So back over on the very left-hand side, you can see the, over here you would have seen, and then I extracted that and put it into Excel. Now, which is interesting here because you have the strengths and areas for improvement by way of feedback. Show that a bit more detail, yeah. So lacks deeper technical insight and so on, could strengthen analysis of structure. And here's the, again, taken from the summary charts into Excel, all the results. So if you have 4 or 44, you can have all of the areas, elements of the assignment brief, as in this case, there's 5 of them, and the marking awarded for each one of these. Now, if you wish, you could break those out and just have the percentage and so on. That's just a case of simple Excel magic, or go back into the AI platform and ask, can you just award the weightings in percentage? And this is the alignment. So I can see that's the extraction of that AI platform. Here are my learning outcomes, learning 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So clearly this assignment fully tested all 5 learning outcomes. The rest were poor in performance. Excuse me. And I think, and that was that. And I now just go back to here. Now, folks, I think that was everything. I just close down. A whistle-stop tour of 2 use cases. There is a lot more that could be demonstrated, and feedback and loops. And the reason I mention that is that I like to look at things from a systems perspective. So what can I do better? How can I change my own approach? How can the next time I need to update the module or modify my own notes and to underpin more effective teaching in particular learning outcomes, or and so on. So the self-learning for me, and getting a third party by analyzing this information, or getting an AI platform, I found that particularly beneficial. And I'm just watching time. I'll hand over back to Pat, and hopefully take any questions or comments, insults, jokes, or whatever. Thanks, Pat.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. So what I just want to do for the last couple of moments is just, I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to share a case study where what I actually did with students their last semester. 1 moment there, please. Just going to share my screen. Sorry, 1 moment. Okay, perfect. Okay. So very briefly for the last couple of minutes that we have, basically I was doing an organizational behavior class. We had about 117 students, and I was very much kind of wanting to kind of bring in AI into the mix and how to integrate AI into the actual assessment. And so what we did essentially is that we the object of the assessment was to create a 10-minute podcast. And the podcast was essentially what they would do is they would create a 10-minute podcast where they would interview a researcher from one of the original classical experiments. So these experiments would be like the Stanford prison experiment, and a lot of these researchers would be dead. But so what we did instead is we used AI to stand in, or to role play in the place of the researchers. And so the students, what they had to do is they had to choose from a list of pre-prepared experiments. Then they'd have to go away and they'd have to come up with a list of questions that they want to ask. And so that will require them to kind of study the experiment, and come up with the appropriate questions regarding ethics and on many other aspects of it. And then you'd have to go ahead, you'd have to go and then you'd have to role play with the AI. So you enter in their questions into AI, and I let them choose whatever AI they wanted to use. So whether it's ChatGPT or whatever, that was really up to them. And what we did then, I also encouraged them to use kind of other AIs. One in particular, which I really like, is probably my favorite AI, is called AImusic.so. And I just really want to show you very briefly what it does. The great thing about AImusic.ao or SO even is that it actually, you can generate music, like actual full music tracks with lyrics. And so the tracks are actually very good. I did a little bit of an example here. Oops, sorry, one moment. And this is called the ABCD song. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. And this is just a very brief example. I'll press play here for you.
HIJKLMNOPQRSTUVWXYZ. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? Letters A to Z.
Okay, so you get the idea. It's actually very good, and you can choose whatever genre you want. It's actually a lot of fun, and there's many ways which this kind of AI, music AI, can be brought into teaching and learning and assessment. And so the students, what they had to do is they had to kind of generate the podcast. They had to kind of have introductory music and different kind of things like that. So it was a lot of fun. After that, then what they had to do is once they had their podcast uploaded, they had to go ahead and they had to review another group's podcast. And that was really interesting because they got to listen to other group teams' work and again, to learn about other experiments and that sort of thing. And they get to rate those experiments then as well, or those podcasts. So then the next thing what we do here, I just want to share a very brief clip of one of the podcasts where Ava, Casey, and Leanne are actually with us today, and we're going to ask them a couple of questions in a moment. But before I want to share just a very, very brief clip of their podcast.
Welcome back to Through the Lens, the podcast where we dissect the world of crime, psychology, and memory, and sometimes leave you questioning your sanity. I'm Sarah, your host, and today we're pulling the trigger on a topic that gets the courtroom buzzing and psychologists scratching their heads. Let's kick things off by talking about the original experiment. We're now going to hear from Dr. Elizabeth Loftus herself, one of the original researchers, as she reflects on the experiment. What initially inspired you to explore the weapon focus effect?
Well, my inspiration really came from my wider interest in memory, specifically how it can be influenced or even be distorted by various factors.
I'd like to bring in a voice of dissent, Dr. Gary Wells, a researcher who has challenged Loftus's work. Dr. Wells, you've argued that weapon focus might not be as clear-cut as Loftus suggests.
Absolutely, Sarah. While I agree that stress plays a role in eyewitness memory, I believe weapon focus effect has been overstated.
Until next time, remember to keep your wits sharp and your focus steady, whether you're dealing with memories or mysteries.
Okay, so that was just a very, very brief. The original podcast was about 10 or 15 minutes long, but it was very good and it was very detailed. So what I want to do is actually just bring in the students real quick and to talk to them. They're actually here with us today. So we have Leanne, we have Katie, and we have Ava. So I'm just going to hold on. I'm just going to pin you guys. Okay. So guys, just quick question: Have you used AI before this assessment in your work?
Not really. We were kind of afraid to, kind of like you spoke about earlier, people not being clear. So we didn't know whether we could or we couldn't. So it was kind of our first experience with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I had no experience with AI before this this assessment, so it was a total new experience. And I wouldn't have been wouldn't have had great digital literacy or digital skills really. So it was actually a great experience to test out using it, and I suppose to explore it with the girls as well and to get their kind of insights into it. And so I think we collaborated really well and we worked together, and it was really enjoyable, I think.
Yeah, I've used it before outside of college and I found it really beneficial. But it was nice to kind of finally get to use it in a form of assessment for a college assignment.
Okay. And did you feel like it was more engaging rather than a typical, say, a report or something similar? Would you say it was much more engaging?
Yeah, we were kind of trying to talk about what we talk about on this today, and we said like it's allowed us to be a bit more creative, build our skills in different ways, like editing, using digital software, I suppose, more than just Word, but also it allowed us to be creative, which is something that we're going to need as both teachers in the classroom, but also just as business students in general.
Definitely, and I think in the world of work, people need us to be dynamic, and I know in the school that I done placement in January, they actually, in collaboration with the local ETB, they actually have started a podcast series around the different skills within the ETB, and like it was nice that kind of people were made aware of editing software and stuff before. I know that wasn't the key component of the assignment, but I think it really made us think creatively.
I definitely would agree with the girls, and I suppose it is nice to have a change from, you know, your typical kind of essay writing or even a report. And it was great to get that freedom, I think, to kind of have that independence to work together and to collaborate and to kind of develop our confidence, and even like kind of public speaking as well, and even to kind of edit it all together, because as I said, I would have had very little digital competencies before this, so definitely have learned a lot through that, and it was a great experience to do that. So it was definitely, I think it's allowed us even to kind of look into to collaborating with like a local radio station, that even in the future for like even a transitional group, it would be a great project for them as well. So definitely lots of ideas.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you being with us. Unfortunately, we're kind of running short in time. But what I want to do is just to kind of finish up saying that I suppose assessment doesn't need just to be I suppose, you know, the same old. You can be creative while still, you know, testing the learning outcomes, which is, I think, is really important. I'm going to just open the floor for the next couple of minutes, just before we finish, just if there's any questions, even for the girls here, you know, or for myself or Mark, feel free to ask them. So if there's any questions, just stick your hand up there and we can probably unmute your mic.
We've got some in the chat. Will I read them out? And,
yes, please.
So the first one is for Mark, and it's from Elaine. It says, "Thank you for your presentation. As TPO, I'm concerned about the use of personal data, and maybe I missed it, but can you clarify what student data did you put into the generative AI tool?"
Generative AI tool, what data? I anonymized their names and student numbers when I was uploading, just as a safeguard. But as I said, I ticked the box in the AI to say this data is not for public use. A number of the platforms have that option up in the three dots or whatever you call it there to drop down. That's two mechanisms. Some of the AI platforms will actually work locally on your own machine, so none of the data is shared whatsoever. So you have a few options to protect students. But while I'm on, I just want to compliment the three ladies and Patrick's work there. The key message coming out is learning digital skills in this environment. It's absolutely critical that students are coming out with AI skills and how to use them. And we could revert back to this whole teaching and assessment using AI. And one of our more effective mechanisms, or at least what I use inside my class, on a weekly basis, I'll carry out a reflective practice with the students. Right, okay, this is what the AI has produced for you on this particular model framework and so on as part of your assessment. Now, can you explain it to me and go through it more and give me other examples of where and how you might apply this? Just a quick Q&A type session, such that I get a feel that there is a level of understanding, and that's addresses one of the key issues of depth of knowledge and understanding that's raising its head in much of the discourse around AI and student use and just taking the superfluous information. But we find that students are actually engaging with the technology very effectively. And I've said this from the very beginning on this whole thing, it's just another tool. It's nothing. It's when, for example, when I started with spreadsheets back in 1982, for heaven's sake, we didn't have icons and so on. It was a tool. it's way surpassed it. Much and all as I've engaged with it, I still couldn't say that I know this tool, but it's just another tool. Do you need to know the code behind it? Do you need to know how all the functions are structured? Of course not. You just need to know how to use them and use them efficiently. And that's what employers are looking for. That type of skills, that type of critical thinking and innovative thinking. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit.
No, that's all right. Karina had a question that picks up on some of the things you were talking there about the student skills. So she asked a question. I work with a large cohort of students on an online program with diverse skills in terms of IT. Is there any tips that you can give around introducing AI into assessment for large groups of students? Maybe we could get both Pat and Mark, but also it'd be great to hear from the girls as well about, because you guys were really good at outlining that you were all coming to it with different skill levels and were there specific things that maybe worked well for you or didn't work well for you when starting to deal with AI?
I think you're muted there, girls.
What we found is we actually took this as an individual assignment first. So each three of us created our own prompts, and then from that we had the output, but from each of our three specific input into the ChatGPT or whatever one we used, they all gave us different characteristics and characters within the podcast. And I think that was nice to show us that it's not exactly the same regardless, even if you put in the same input, because we tried that at a later stage using the same input for the output and it was different across all three, I think.
Yeah, so then we kind of created a blend of the three in a way that we thought it worked. So we used AI as a tool, but not as, I suppose, the final product.
Yeah, so it was a great kind of guide for us and gave us a great idea of what way to kind of lay out the assignment. But then once we collected them all together, we were able to kind of, to collaborate our ideas and input some of our own information.
And then, like Pat said, we had quite a long podcast, so he just took, I suppose, some of the best bits. But we actually were a group of three, and there were some groups of 4 and 5. So to make an additional character, we used AI, like a voice tool, to add a kind of Snoop Dogg style FBI agent. So there was a bit of comedy or humor in there, but we were able to use AI to create a 4th person, which was really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. Thank you, girls. And I might go over to Mark and Pat there. Do you guys, off the back of that, have any suggestions about introducing AI to students with different levels of IT experience?
Yeah, like there's lots of different things you can do with AI, especially. With AI you can, it can be implemented in performances, art, depending on your subject. You can always kind of bring into many different kind of areas. It's all about kind of being cross-disciplinary as well. So, ask yourself, okay, I have these kind of learning outcomes I need to obviously meet, and I need to be able to assess them. But other than that, how else can I be creative? What kind of elements that I can bring in that will be engaging, that'll be interesting for students? And I suppose the big thing now is more, multi-step kind of assessments. It might be portfolios. They might even be asked to, to generate an essay, say, with AI, use AI to do it, and then critique it, and to see where, what would you do differently, or how would you approach this argument, or whatever the case might be. So there's many different ways you could go ahead and you can actually integrate it in. I've actually even played around with kind of doing AI assisted reflective learning, where they would set up AI as kind of a partner to talk to, who would ask them, deep questions about their experience, maybe in teaching experience or whatever the case might be, and they'd record that, and that'd be part of their reflection as part of their assignment. So there's lots of different ways in which AI can be implemented, in assessments. If you're just creative and want to, and try it out and see how it goes on, I think there's lots we can do.
Yeah, and how about you, Mark? Do you think there's any tips for someone trying to integrate AI with students that might have different IT skill levels?
I would ignore IT skill levels. Bold statement to make, because it's a language interface, and if we just providing the platforms and used or typed or spoken. I mean, some of these tools you can voice record onto them. Look at it from that perspective. Once you have access to a PC, virtually all of these platforms, well, that's not a true statement. Many of these platforms are free, or at least you'll have free versions of them. I know I mentioned that I have the LM Plus, gives me a little bit more scope, but all of the much of the functionality, the core functionality is free. Get in and play with those. That's learn by doing. So regardless of how big the cohort of the class is, they can always start on free versions and simple prompts, just getting it to engage with the system. And there was an article, I sent it on again this morning, where there could be how did they call it, an issue around inclusivity and diversity with respect to AI for students. What essentially they were alluding to was that if people are in the economic fortunate state to be able to pay for AI versus students who can't pay for it and so on, that could impact. Now, I think it's a very weak argument as such, because you can do it's human nature. We'll always find an alternative way of doing things. And I think that's the mentality that needs to be applied. So coming back to basics, access to the free tools and build the interactions and get it to do things. Again, it's just typing skills and improve, and it will help you to improve. It's what's known as a chain of thought. As you're building these prompts, you'll start with simple prompts and you'll add a bit more, and maybe you'll combine them and daisy chain the prompts until you have one big paragraph, as Pat very aptly described, a very complex prompt, but it was built in stages to give a final result. So you get better. It's a learn by doing process, and so that would be my contribution in terms of.
I think you raise a really good point especially around the idea of accessibility, because I know initially there was a sense that the generative AIs were going to be a really good leveling for giving people access who might have different struggles. But although increasingly I do notice, and I was even reflecting on it myself with a family member of mine who has language processing problems, that and being able to pick the right words to communicate, to construct a prompt, incredibly difficult. And so there is, I think, definitely a need to think about. I know at Kent they had a speaker on who was talking about how some of the generative AI interfaces aren't necessarily accessible for people with different needs, such as dyslexia or issues around color blindness and things like that. So it is definitely, I think, when you're thinking about IT, it's great that you bring that, as you pointed out, yes, maybe leave aside whether they have IT skills, but we do, of course, have to keep in mind some of those accessibility things, which is really interesting. And then we just have one last one, and then I think we might wrap up there because we are a little over. From Catherine, and she asked, could students not just ask AI to create a podcast interview transcript when given the studies students were asked to study? So I think she's asking, could they not just take the scholarship and material and just drop it in and have, like we saw with on the LM notebook, create a podcast? But I'm assuming that it's the instructions behind that. So we might answer, or I see the girls have their hand up, but we maybe go to that and then we'll come back to you, Patrick. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
What we found is, because you could have just asked it, attach the assignment brief to ChatGPT and just asked it to write out a brief. But I think if you listen to the podcast in its entirety, you can see that we actually done research on the project, and that's probably where our grade came from. That you can see we read a few papers, we read papers that didn't agree with the weapon focus effect study, and we referenced them in our prompts and stuff to get the responses that we wanted from, I think it was Dr. Wells that was shown there in the brief podcast. So I think that was the whole point of it, was to create a transcript. But I think you need to do further research or attach additional documentation to your original brief to kind of really get the best you can out of what the assignment was.
And like Catherine said, and I'm sure Pat will go on about it, but it was in the instructions, I suppose, behind that. So like the instructions Pat gave there wasn't the full brief that we were given, and we were given much more clear instructions on how to use AI and what was allowed and what wasn't really allowed, and his expectations. So I think in a whole, it was, yeah, to use AI as a tool, and technically AI could write the script, but it was your prompts and the way in which you engaged with the AI tool that really led to the creation of your podcast. And those 3 voices you heard were all ours. So and every student across the class or the cohort had to use like their own recording as well to show that they were involved in the group work.
Very, very good. I'll hand over. Thank you, girls. That's very insightful. And Pat, do you have anything to add to that? I think they might have covered everything for you.
I think they're excellent. What can I say? No, absolutely. You know, you can't get away from the fact that, you know, if someone wants to cheat, they're going to cheat. You know, you do your best to kind of give them the opportunity to use these tools and kind of mitigate the risk as much as possible. But at the end of the day, yes, they could get the questions written. They mightn't do the work, but that goes for pretty much any assessment, unless you lock them in a room without any electronics and assess them that way, which is really not very beneficial. Yes, there's no guarantee, but you can put things in place where you can mitigate the. For example, you know, a multi-step kind of. So, for example, the students had to hand up a transcript of their questions, and they developed them in class and stuff like that. So they weren't just saying, okay, go away and do a podcast and come back, but they actually actively developed it. I worked with them through the tutorials and showed them how to do certain things. And they actually did a lot of this work in class as well in preparation for the actual recording. So not only did I witness them doing the work, but actually they can actually, you know, use AI to do it. But, you know, again, it's really one of those areas that, you know, that's the problem with AI. It's never going to be foolproof. You have to kind of, there is that level of trust you have to have with your students. And I'm sure you will get students that will kind of push the boundaries. But, you know, you'd hope that, you know, by kind of making it engaging and interesting, that they'll engage with it and see the benefits for themselves.
Well, look, that was great. Thank you all today. Thank you to our fabulous students. You guys were great. It's really great to hear your voice. Thank you to Marc. And of course, thank you to Patrick. It was really lovely today. As always, we will have the videos produced. We're going to have them coming through and online soon, so you'll be able to access and look back at some of these things, because lots of really good things covered today. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Cheerio, folks.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Take care.